The Aryan Brotherhood stormed a funeral. They never imagined who was inside the coffin. The rain hammered against the weathered roof of St. Michael's Church in San Bernardino, California, each drop adding to the somber atmosphere inside. The small chapel was half empty, filled mostly with older faces, wearing expressions of grief and resignation. They had gathered to mourn Tommy "Ghost" Martinez, a 34-year-old man who had supposedly died of a heroin overdose 3 days earlier in a motel room on the east side of town. The casket sat closed at the front of the church, draped in white lilies that seemed too pure for the life that had allegedly ended. Marcus Webb sat in the back pew, his weathered hands clasped together as he surveyed the mourners. At 47, Marcus had spent more years inside California's prison system than out, his arms covered in faded tattoos that told stories of violence and survival. He wore a simple black suit that didn't quite fit his broad shoulders, borrowed from a cousin who had made it out of the life years ago. Marcus had known Tommy since the kid was 16, watched him get swallowed up by the streets and the needles that came with them. Now, he was here, paying respects to another young life cut short. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. We appreciate every single one of you. Outside, 3 black SUVs rolled slowly through the rain-soaked streets, their windows tinted dark enough to hide the occupants inside. In the lead vehicle, Derek "Reaper" Hansen gripped the steering wheel with tattooed hands, his knuckles white with tension. At 39, Reaper had been a shot caller for the Aryan Brotherhood for over a decade, his reputation built on calculated violence and unwavering loyalty to the brand. His ice-blue eyes fixed on the church ahead, his jaw clenched with determination. "You sure about this?" asked Jake Morrison from the passenger seat, his hand resting on the .45 caliber pistol tucked into his waistband. Jake was younger, only 27, but he had proven himself in the yard at Pelican Bay, earning his lightning bolts through blood and commitment. "Ghost was a rat," Reaper said, his voice cold and flat. "Word came down from the council. He was working with the feds, feeding them information about our operations. The overdose was convenient, too convenient. We need to send a message that even in death, traitors don't get peace." In the back seat, 2 more members sat in silence. Tommy "Hammer" Brooks, a hulking figure at 6'4" and 250 pounds, cracked his knuckles methodically. Beside him, Kevin Walsh checked the magazine in his Glock, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The SUVs pulled into the church parking lot, engines idling as the 4 men prepared to move. They had done this type of work before, sending messages, maintaining order through fear and violence. The Aryan Brotherhood operated with a simple code. Betrayal meant death, and no one was beyond their reach. Marcus noticed the vehicles first, his instincts sharpened by years of watching his back. Something felt wrong about the way they parked, the way the engines kept running. He glanced toward the front of the church, where Tommy's mother sat in the first pew, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His daughter, a girl no older than 10, held her grandmother's hand, confused about why her uncle was in that box and why everyone looked so sad. The church doors burst open with a crash that echoed through the sacred space. Reaper entered first, flanked by his crew, their presence immediately transforming the somber gathering into something dangerous and volatile. The mourners gasped, some diving for cover behind the pews, while others froze in terror. "Nobody move," Reaper commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. Jake and Kevin moved to block the exits, while Hammer advanced toward the casket, his massive frame casting shadows across the altar. Father Rodriguez, an elderly priest who had served this community for 30 years, stepped forward with trembling hands raised. "Please, this is a house of God. Whatever grievances you have, this is not the place. "Sit down, old man," Jake snarled, pointing his weapon at the priest. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus remained in his seat, calculating his options. He was unarmed. Parole conditions made sure of that. But his mind raced through scenarios. There were children here, innocent people who had nothing to do with whatever beef these AB members had with Tommy. His eyes met those of a woman across the aisle, a single mother he recognized from the neighborhood. She clutched her son close, her face pale with terror. Reaper approached the casket slowly, reverently almost, as if the act of desecrating a funeral held some twisted honor in his mind. "Tommy Martinez," he announced to the room, "was a traitor to his brothers. He sold out his own people, worked with federal agents to destroy families and lives. Even in death, he doesn't deserve respect." "You're wrong," a voice called from the front. Tommy's mother stood, her grief temporarily overcome by righteous anger. "My boy wasn't no rat. He was trying to get clean, trying to make something of himself." "Sit down, lady," Hammer growled, moving closer to her. But the old woman didn't flinch, her years of living in rough neighborhoods having long ago burned away any fear of men like these. "I won't let you dishonor my son," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Whatever you think he did, he was still a human being. He was still my child." Reaper's expression didn't change. "Hammer, open it." The massive enforcer moved to the casket, his hands gripping the polished wood lid. The hinges creaked as he lifted it, revealing the contents inside. But instead of Tommy Martinez's body, they found something that made all 4 AB members freeze. The casket was empty, except for a single file folder lying where a body should have been. Hammer reached for it, confusion replacing the confidence he had entered with. He opened the folder, his eyes widening as he read the contents. "What the hell?" Jake moved closer, looking over Hammer's shoulder. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing their own operations. Pictures of drug deals, meetings, weapons transactions, names, dates, locations, years of evidence compiled meticulously. Reaper snatched the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through page after page of damning documentation. "This is impossible. Where's the body?" "Looking for me?" The voice came from behind them, near the church's side entrance. The 4 AB members spun around to see a man stepping out of the shadows. He was lean and weathered, with the kind of face that had seen violence up close. But it wasn't his appearance that shocked them. It was the fact that he was supposed to be dead. Tommy Martinez stood before them, very much alive, flanked by 24 FBI agents in tactical gear who poured into the church from multiple entrances. They moved with practiced precision, weapons drawn and trained on the stunned Aryan Brotherhood members. "Tommy Martinez," the man said, his voice carrying a different accent than the street kid Reaper thought he knew, "isn't my real name. Special Agent Michael Torres, FBI. I've been undercover in various white supremacist organizations for 6 years. The past 18 months, I've been documenting everything the Aryan Brotherhood does in Southern California." Reaper's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You son of a... On the ground now!" Multiple agents converged on the 4 men, forcing them to their knees as handcuffs snapped around their wrists. Jake tried to resist, but 2 agents tackled him hard against the church floor. Kevin dropped his weapon, recognizing the futility of resistance. Hammer went down last, requiring 4 agents to subdue his massive frame. Marcus watched from his pew, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. He had suspected something was different about Ghost these past few months. The kid had been too careful, too observant, asking questions that seemed innocuous but were actually gathering intelligence. Now it all made sense. Agent Torres, the man they had known as Tommy, approached Reaper as agents secured the scene. "You stormed a funeral to desecrate what you thought was my corpse," he said quietly. "You brought weapons into a church. terrorized innocent people, including children. And you did it all because you were so arrogant, so confident in your power, that you never imagined someone could infiltrate you this deeply. You're dead, Reaper hissed, spitting blood from where his face had hit the floor. The Brotherhood has reach everywhere. You think witness protection will save you? You think the Brotherhood's Leadership Council will be arrested within the hour, Torres interrupted. Every shot caller, every lieutenant, every member whose name appears in these files. This operation isn't just about you four. It's about dismantling the entire organization in California. Your network is finished. The FBI agents began escorting the prisoners out of the church. Reaper, Jake, Hammer, and Kevin were led away in chains. Their plans to terrorize a funeral turned into their own capture. Outside, more agents processed the scene, while paramedics checked on the traumatized mourners. Father Rodriguez approached Torres, his elderly face showing relief mixed with residual fear. That was incredibly dangerous, young man, using a funeral, a sacred space, as a trap. We knew they'd come, Torres explained, his voice showing the weight of months spent living a lie. Reaper was obsessed with sending messages, maintaining fear. When we faked my death and made it look like an overdose, we knew the Brotherhood would see it as weakness, as an opportunity. They couldn't resist desecrating what they thought was my funeral. Their arrogance became their downfall. Tommy's mother, actually an FBI agent herself, removed her disguise, peeling away the makeup that had aged her decades. "Good work, Michael," she said. "But next time, can we not make me cry real tears? That method acting stuff is exhausting." Torres managed a tired laugh. "No promises, Rodriguez." Marcus stood and approached the agent, extending his hand. "I knew something was different about you, Ghost, or Torres, or whatever your name is. You helped me out a few times when you didn't have to, gave me advice that kept me from getting pulled back into the life." Torres shook his hand firmly. "You were trying to go straight, Marcus. I respected that. Not everyone in that world is beyond redemption. You proved that." "What happens now?" Marcus asked, glancing at the agents securing the church. "Now, we process the biggest takedown of white supremacist gang activity in California history," Torres said. "This operation, codenamed Coffin Nail, has been building for years. Tonight was just the culmination. We have enough evidence to put away dozens of members for decades. The drug trafficking, the murders, the extortion, all documented and ready for prosecution." As the rain continued to fall outside, the church slowly emptied of law enforcement and witnesses. The casket remained open and empty, a symbol of the deception that had brought down one of the most dangerous prison gangs in America. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded across California. Simultaneous raids hit Aryan Brotherhood safe houses, stash locations, and meeting spots. Members were arrested in their homes, at their jobs, even during their own criminal activities. The carefully constructed network that had operated with near impunity for decades crumbled under the weight of Torres's evidence. In a federal courthouse in Los Angeles, Reaper sat in an orange jumpsuit, shackled to the defense table. His lawyers had tried to mount a defense, but the evidence was overwhelming. Photos, recordings, financial documents, all obtained during Torres's deep undercover operation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: attempted murder, weapons violations, conspiracy, and racketeering under the RICO Act. Jake Morrison received 35 years. Kevin Walsh got 28. Tommy Brooks, the enforcer known as Hammer, was sentenced to 40 years for his extensive violent history. But it was Reaper who received the harshest sentence, life without the possibility of parole, plus consecutive sentences that ensured he would die in federal custody. As the judge read the sentence, Reaper's cold blue eyes fixed on the back of the courtroom where Torres sat in plain clothes, watching the proceedings. There was no triumph in the agent's expression. only tired satisfaction that justice had been served. He had spent 6 years of his life pretending to be someone else, living among violent extremists, participating in activities that disgusted him, all to bring them down from the inside. The story of the funeral infiltration spread through both law enforcement circles and the criminal underworld. For the FBI, it became a case study in successful deep-cover operations. For other organized crime groups, it served as a warning that anyone could be an informant, that trust was a luxury that could get you life in prison. Marcus Webb attended the sentencing, sitting in the public gallery with other witnesses who had been at the church that day. Afterward, he found Torres in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by other agents receiving congratulations. "Agent Torres," Marcus called out. The undercover agent turned, recognizing him immediately. "Marcus, good to see you. How have you been?" "Staying clean, staying straight," Marcus replied. "Got a job at a warehouse, nothing fancy, but it's honest work. I wanted to thank you again for the advice you gave me. You probably saved my life by steering me away from that deal with the Inland Empire crew." Torres smiled genuinely. "You did that yourself, Marcus. I just pointed out the obvious. You had the strength to walk away." "So what's next for you? Another undercover gig?" The agent shook his head slowly. "No, I think I'm done with deep cover work. 6 years is enough. The Bureau wants me to train new agents, share what I learned, maybe help develop better protocols for these long-term operations. It's time to live my real life for a while." "You got family?" "A daughter," Torres admitted. "She's 8 now. She thinks I work in an office doing paperwork. Never saw me during the undercover years. Too dangerous. Now I get to actually be her father instead of just a stranger who sends birthday cards through Bureau channels." Marcus nodded with understanding. "That's good, man. That's real good. Kids need their fathers, even when those fathers are out there doing dangerous work to make the world safer." As they parted ways, Torres reflected on the cost of the operation. 6 years of his life spent pretending to be someone else. 6 years of witnessing violence, of participating in activities that violated his core values, all to gather evidence that would stand up in court. 6 years of missing his daughter's childhood, of lying to everyone around him, of living in constant fear that one mistake would expose him and end his life. But standing in that courthouse, watching as Reaper and his crew were led away to spend decades behind bars, Torres felt that the sacrifice had meaning. The Aryan Brotherhood's California operations were effectively destroyed. The drug trafficking routes were shut down. The violence they had perpetrated on communities of color, on innocent people, on anyone they deemed inferior, that reign of terror was over. The empty coffin at St. Michael's Church had been the perfect metaphor. The Aryan Brotherhood had come to defile what they thought was a body, to send a message of fear and control. Instead, they found their own downfall waiting inside, documentation of their crimes, evidence of their evil, and a federal agent who had sacrificed years of his life to bring them down. Father Rodriguez later reconsecrated the church, performing a ceremony to cleanse the sacred space of the violence that had briefly invaded it. The community came together for a real memorial service, this time honoring not a fictional death, but the courage of an undercover agent and the end of a terrorist organization that had plagued their neighborhoods. Tommy's fictional mother, Agent Rodriguez, returned to her normal duties, working white-collar crime cases in downtown Los Angeles. The child actor who had played the daughter received counseling to process the traumatic scene she had witnessed, even though she knew it was staged. The other mourners, who had been undercover agents, resumed their regular assignments, grateful that the dangerous operation had concluded successfully. In Pelican Bay State Prison, news of the arrests spread through the population like wildfire. Aryan Brotherhood members still inside scrambled to cover their tracks, destroying contraband and severing ties with outside connections. The power structure that had dominated prison yards for decades began to fracture as members turned on each other, suspecting everyone of being potential informants. Torres visited Marcus one more time, months after the sentencing, meeting him at the warehouse where the ex-convict now worked. They sat on the loading dock during Marcus's lunch break, eating sandwiches and watching forklifts move pallets of goods. "You know what the crazy thing is?" Marcus said between bites. "For years, I thought the Brotherhood was untouchable. They ran everything inside, had connections everywhere outside, seemed like they'd never fall. Then one agent, one operation, and the whole thing collapses." "It wasn't just one agent," Torres corrected. "There were dozens of people involved, surveillance teams, analysts, prosecutors, other undercover agents providing supporting intelligence. I was just the face of it, the one who got close enough to document everything. Still, man, what you did took guts. Living with those guys, knowing if they found out who you really were." "I tried not to think about it," Torres admitted. "The fear would have paralyzed me. I just focused on the mission, on gathering evidence, on staying in character. Some days were harder than others. Watching them brutalize people, hearing their racist rhetoric, pretending to agree with their hateful ideology, it ate at my soul." "Why'd you do it then? Why put yourself through that?" Torres was quiet for a moment, staring out at the industrial complex surrounding the warehouse. "Because somebody had to. These organizations, these hate groups, they don't stop unless someone stops them. They feed on fear and violence, spreading poison through communities. I had the skills, the background, the ability to infiltrate them. If I didn't do it, who would?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Respect, man. Real respect." They finished their lunch in comfortable silence, two men from different worlds who had been briefly connected by an undercover operation that had changed California's criminal landscape. When Torres stood to leave, Marcus shook his hand firmly. "You ever need anything, Agent Torres, you let me know. I owe you my freedom, maybe my life." "Just keep doing what you're doing, Marcus. Stay straight. Be an example for others trying to leave that life. That's all the thanks I need." As Torres drove away from the warehouse, he thought about the empty coffin in St. Michael's Church, about the shock on Reaper's face when he realized he'd been deceived, about the justice that had finally been served. The operation had cost him years of his life, but it had saved countless others from the violence and hatred of the Aryan Brotherhood. The funeral that never was had become the burial of an entire criminal organization. And in the empty space where a body should have been, they found something far more valuable: accountability, justice, and the end of a reign of terror that had lasted too long. 6 months after the sentencing, Torres received a letter at FBI headquarters. It was from Reaper, sent from Federal Supermax, where the most dangerous criminals were housed. The agent debated whether to open it, but curiosity won out. The letter was short, written in crude handwriting. "You played your role well, rat. But the Brotherhood is bigger than you, bigger than your operation. We'll rebuild. We always do. And someday, somewhere, justice will be served for what you did to us. This ain't over." Torres read it twice, then filed it away in his desk. The threats didn't surprise him. Men like Reaper never truly accepted defeat, but the reality was that the California branch of the Aryan Brotherhood had been decimated. Leadership was imprisoned, financial networks were seized, and the few remaining members were too scattered and surveilled to effectively reorganize. The empty coffin had held the truth that would destroy them, and that truth had been waiting patiently for them to arrive, arrogant and confident in their power. They had stormed a funeral expecting to find a dead informant. Instead, they found a living federal agent and the end of their organization. Justice, Torres reflected, sometimes required patience, sacrifice, and the willingness to become someone you're not to catch those who would destroy society from within. The 6 years undercover had aged him, changed him in ways he was still discovering. But sitting at his desk, training new agents on the complexities of deep cover operations, he knew it had been worth it. The story of the funeral would be told for years in law enforcement training academies, a textbook example of patience, planning, and the decisive moment when months of preparation culminated in a single, perfectly executed trap. And in the communities that had suffered under Aryan Brotherhood violence, there was a quiet sense of relief, a feeling that maybe the world had become a little bit safer because one agent was willing to sacrifice everything to bring monsters to justice. The empty coffin at St. Michael's Church had delivered a message far more powerful than the desecration the Brotherhood had planned. It announced the end of their power, the exposure of their crimes, and the victory of justice over hate. And in federal prisons across California, that message echoed through cell blocks and prison yards, a warning that even the most powerful criminal organizations could fall when their arrogance exceeded their caution. Tommy "Ghost" Martinez, the street kid who never existed, had died as planned. But Special Agent Michael Torres lived on, carrying the memories and scars of an operation that would define his career and change the landscape of organized crime in California forever. 3 years had passed since the funeral operation that brought down the California branch of the Aryan Brotherhood, and Special Agent Michael Torres had settled into a new routine. He taught advanced undercover tactics at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, sharing lessons from his 6 years embedded in one of America's most dangerous prison gangs. His daughter Sophia was 11 now, and they had built a relationship that felt real, no longer shadowed by the lies and absences that undercover work demanded. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October when Torres received the call that would pull him back into the world he thought he'd left behind. He was in his office reviewing case files from trainees when his phone rang, displaying a San Bernardino area code he recognized immediately. "Torres," he answered, his voice cautious. "Agent Torres, this is Detective Sarah Mendez, San Bernardino PD. We met during the Brotherhood takedown 3 years ago." Her voice carried an urgency that made Torres sit up straighter in his chair. "I remember. What's going on, Detective?" "Marcus Webb was attacked this morning outside his workplace. He's in critical condition at San Bernardino Community Hospital. The assailants left a calling card, AB symbols spray-painted on the warehouse wall where he works." Torres felt his blood run cold. Marcus had been at that funeral, had been a witness to the arrests. More than that, he had become a symbol of redemption, proof that people could leave gang life behind. If the Brotherhood remnants were targeting him, it meant they were trying to send a message that no one who helped bring them down was safe. "I'm on the next flight out," Torres said, already pulling up airline schedules on his computer. "How bad is he?" "Severe head trauma, multiple stab wounds. Doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. Torres, there's something else." We found a note pinned to his jacket. It just said, "Ghost remembers." "And they think you set this up, that Marcus was part of your operation." "He wasn't," Torres said firmly. "He was just a man trying to go straight who happened to be at that funeral. He's a victim in this, not an asset." "I know that. But the Brotherhood doesn't care about the truth. They care about revenge." Torres caught a red-eye flight that night, landing in Los Angeles just after dawn. He drove straight to the hospital, his FBI credentials getting him past security and up to the intensive care unit where Marcus lay unconscious, his head wrapped in bandages and tubes running from his arms. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring vitals that spoke of a man fighting for his life. Detective Mendez met him outside the room, a tall woman in her mid-40s with tired eyes that had seen too much violence. "He hasn't regained consciousness since they brought him in," she explained. "We have officers posted, but I'm worried they'll try again." "Who did this?" Torres asked, studying Marcus through the window. "We're still piecing it together. Witnesses say 3 men jumped him in the parking lot around 6 a.m. when he was arriving for his shift. They wore masks, but one of them was huge, probably 6'4", 250. Another had a limp, favoring his right leg." Torres processed the descriptions, running them through his mental database of Brotherhood members. "Kevin Walsh has a limp from getting stabbed in Corcoran State Prison 5 years ago. He was supposed to be serving 28 years, but if he made parole somehow—" "He didn't," Mendez interrupted. "We checked. Walsh is still inside, but his brother, Ryan Walsh, isn't. And Ryan fits the description of the one with the limp. Motorcycle accident in 2019 left him with permanent nerve damage." "Blah. So the Brotherhood is using associates on the outside, people who weren't caught in the original sweep." Torres felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was his operation, his case, and now innocent people were paying the price because he'd done his job too well. He spent the next week in San Bernardino, coordinating with local law enforcement and bringing in FBI resources to track down Marcus's attackers. They identified Ryan Walsh through surveillance footage from a gas station 2 blocks from the warehouse. His distinctive walk captured on camera as he filled up a stolen pickup truck. The vehicle was found burned out in the desert 3 days later, wiped clean of forensic evidence. Marcus regained consciousness on the 5th day, his eyes fluttering open to find Torres sitting beside his hospital bed. "Agent Torres," he whispered, his voice rough and weak. "They said you came." "Of course I came," Torres replied, leaning forward. "Marcus, I'm sorry. This is on me. They targeted you because of the funeral, because they think you were working with us." "Wasn't your fault," Marcus managed, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. "I made my choices, was at that church because I wanted to be, not because anyone made me." "Can you tell me what you remember?" Marcus closed his eyes, the memory clearly painful. 3 of them. "Came out of nowhere when I was walking from my car. The big one hit me first, knocked me down. Then they started kicking, stabbing. One of them leaned close, said, 'This is what happens to rats who help the feds.' I tried to tell them I wasn't no rat, but they didn't care. You get a look at any of them?" The one who spoke, he had a tattoo on his neck. Lightning bolts, you know the kind. And his eyes, man, his eyes were wrong, like he enjoyed it. Torres knew that look. He'd seen it during his undercover years, the expression of men who had lost whatever humanity they once possessed. "We're going to find them, Marcus, and we're going to make sure you're protected." "Can't live my life looking over my shoulder," Marcus said. "That ain't living, that's just surviving. It won't be forever. We'll get these guys." But finding the attackers proved more difficult than Torres anticipated. Ryan Walsh had gone underground, along with the 2 men who had helped him. The Brotherhood's outside network, though diminished, still had enough reach to hide their own. Safe houses, sympathetic family members, and a code of silence made tracking them a slow, frustrating process. 2 weeks after the attack, Torres sat in a task force meeting with FBI agents, local detectives, and representatives from the California Department of Corrections. Maps covered the walls, photographs of suspects pinned alongside known associates and possible hideouts. "The problem," explained Agent Jennifer Park, Torres's colleague from the FBI's gang unit, "is that we're dealing with true believers. These aren't just criminals. They're ideologically committed. Prison sentences don't deter them because they see incarceration as a badge of honor." "So what's our play?" Mendez asked. "We can't just wait for them to attack someone else." Torres studied the map, his mind working through angles and possibilities. We need to think like they do. The attack on Marcus wasn't random. It was symbolic. They chose him because he was at the funeral, because he represents redemption and change. What they really want is me, but they can't get to me directly. So they hit people connected to you, Park concluded. Who else was at that funeral? The room fell silent as everyone realized the implications. There had been dozens of people in that church, many of them innocent community members who had nothing to do with law enforcement. Any of them could be targets. We need to reach out to everyone who was there, Torres said. Warn them, offer protection where necessary, and we need to be proactive, not reactive. Set up surveillance on known Brotherhood sympathizers, put pressure on their associates, make it harder for them to operate. Over the next month, the task force worked around the clock. They identified and warned 23 people who had been present at the funeral, offering protective details to those deemed most at risk. They executed search warrants on 5 properties connected to AB associates, seizing weapons, drugs, and communications that helped map the organization's current structure. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A woman named Linda Walsh, Ryan's sister, contacted the FBI tip line. She had been cleaning her brother's apartment. He was staying with her while supposedly looking for work, and found a detailed list of names and addresses. Marcus Webb's name had been crossed out, but 14 others remained, including Father Rodriguez, Tommy's fictional mother, Agent Rodriguez, and several other witnesses from the funeral. He's planning more attacks, Linda told Torres during a recorded interview at the FBI field office. He thinks he's doing God's work or something, cleansing the community of race traitors and Fed sympathizers. But these are just people, you know. They were at a funeral. They didn't do nothing wrong. Why are you coming forward? Torres asked gently. He's your brother. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Because I got kids of my own. Because I'm tired of this hate consuming my family. My brother's gone down a path I can't follow, and if he hurts more people, I couldn't live with myself for staying quiet. Her information led them to a compound in the desert outside Victorville, where Ryan Walsh and his accomplices had been hiding. The FBI hostage rescue team conducted the raid at dawn, catching the 3 men before they could mount a defense. Ryan Walsh was found with a loaded AR-15 and detailed surveillance photos of their next target, Father Rodriguez at St. Michael's Church. The arrest made headlines across California. FBI prevents mass casualty attack on church, the Los Angeles Times proclaimed. The article detailed how remnants of the Aryan Brotherhood had planned a revenge attack 3 years after their organization's dismantling, and how the courage of one woman had prevented a tragedy. Torres visited Marcus in the hospital the day after the arrests. The ex-convict was sitting up now, eating solid food and making jokes with the nurses. His recovery had been slow but steady, his body healing even as the psychological scars remained fresh. They got him, Torres said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. Ryan Walsh and his crew. They're in federal custody facing attempted murder, conspiracy, hate crime enhancements. They're looking at decades. Marcus nodded slowly, relief washing over his weathered face. It's really over. This part is. There might be others out there with grudges, but the organized threat is neutralized. The Brotherhood's power is broken, and every attack they attempt just brings more law enforcement attention. They're dying, Marcus. Not quickly, but dying nonetheless. What about me? Where do I go from here? Torres had been thinking about that question since the attack. The Bureau has a witness protection program, but I don't think that's right for you. You're not a witness. You're a survivor. You've already built a new life once. You can do it again. We'll help however we can, but the choice is yours. I want to stay, Marcus said firmly. Want to keep my job, my apartment, my life. Running means they win, means they scared me bad enough to give up everything I worked for. I ain't giving them that satisfaction. Then we'll make sure you're safe. Extra patrols, security upgrades at your home and workplace, direct line to law enforcement if anything feels wrong. Marcus extended his hand, and Torres shook it firmly. You're a good man, Agent Torres. You did what you had to do going undercover, and you've done right by me ever since. Thank you. 6 months later, Torres returned to San Bernardino one final time. Marcus had fully recovered and was back at work, promoted to shift supervisor at the warehouse. They met for coffee at a diner near the hospital where Marcus had spent weeks fighting for his life. Strange how things work out, Marcus reflected, stirring sugar into his cup. I went to a funeral for a man who didn't exist, witnessed the takedown of a gang that terrorized people for decades, got nearly killed for being in the wrong place at the right time, and somehow ended up better off than when I started. How do you figure? Torres asked. Because I learned I'm stronger than I thought, because I didn't run when things got hard, because I chose to live my life on my own terms instead of letting fear control me. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. And because I met people like you and Detective Mendez and Linda Walsh, people who do the right thing, even when it's dangerous or costly, that gives me hope, you know. Torres understood. His 6 years undercover had shown him the worst of humanity, the hatred, violence and cruelty that people were capable of inflicting on each other. But the aftermath had shown him the best. The courage of witnesses who came forward, the dedication of law enforcement officers who worked tirelessly for justice, and the resilience of people like Marcus who refused to let evil define their lives. As he drove back to the airport that evening, Torres thought about the empty coffin that had started everything. It had been a deception, a trap designed to catch dangerous men in the act of desecrating what they thought was sacred. But in a way, it had also been a promise that justice would prevail, that good people would stand up to hate, and that even the most powerful criminal organizations could fall when their arrogance exceeded their caution. The Aryan Brotherhood would never fully disappear. There would always be hateful people drawn to violent ideologies, but their power was broken, their leadership imprisoned, and their mystique shattered. And that was enough. That was the victory that mattered.